Meaningful use stage 2, core set 7, patient electronic access to protected health information. Core set 7 requirements actually come in two pieces. There's measure 1, which requires that more than 50% of all unique patients seen by the eligible provider within the reporting period are given timely access to their health information online. And by timely, it is defined as within 4 business days after the information is available, meaning 4 days from the encounter date of service. Now, the objective of this is, of course, to make sure patients have the ability to view their information online and then to download it or transmit it to a third party if they so desire. Now, at the end of the reporting period, the results reported during attestation is going to be numerical and is going to represent a count of unique patients. Of course, with numerical attestation results, we have a denominator and a numerator. The denominator is going to be a count of all unique patients seen by the eligible provider within the reporting period, as well as up until the actual attestation date. The numerator then are going to be the patients who are actually given a user ID and password to the portal within the 4 days after their encounter date of service, and this must exceed 50%. Now, with regards to giving these credentials to your patient, there are two ways. One, if you have entered an email address on patient register for the patient, once that email address is saved in Prognosis, an email is automatically generated to the patient with their login credentials. Or two, in the absence of an email, you can manually tell the patient an ID and password and create one manually, but in order to get credit to ensure that that was indeed done manually, the patient will actually have to log in at least once to the portal. Now, the second part of Measure 7 is more than 5% of all unique patients seen during the reporting period or their authorized representatives view, download, or transmit to a third party that health information. So whereas the measure 1 that we just spoke of is simply giving the patient access, whether they do something or not with it, this measure actually requires the patients to do something. So they have to physically log in using those credentials. Same objective as above, given the ability to view their information online. The same type of result at attestation is a numerical count of unique patients, meaning denominator, numerator. Same denominator criteria being all unique patients seen within the reporting period up until attestation. Numerator, however, is going to require action. So it is not just giving the patient a user ID and password as in the first measure, but here they have to actually log into the portal, actually view it, download it, print it, or transmit it to a third party. Now, this is only a 5% requirement. So even though 50% need to be given the access for measure 1 of core set 7, only 5% of your patient population has to literally log in and do something. This must be executed by the patient or their authorized representative, and it will be captured within the Prognosis audit trail in order for you to get proper credit. There will be a log generated at the transactional level on our system to ensure that patients who have user ID and password or who have assigned an authorized representative with a user ID and password, that at least 5% of those are actually using it. There are two exclusions also. Exclusion 1, which applies again both to the A part, giving access, and the B part, actually viewing the ambulatory summary. The exclusion would be if you as an eligible provider do not order anything or create any information that by definition should be included in an online record. And to be quite frank, this is probably impossible to qualify for. Every encounter constitutes some level of data that is defined as part of a patient's health information, which must be made available online. The second exclusion is a little easier to attain, perhaps, but it is based on your geography. So if you are rurally located in a place that doesn't have the appropriate broadband capacity for more than 50% of the housing units in your county, on the first day of your reporting period, then you are able to exclude measure 2 only. So the first exclusion is applicable to both measure 1 and measure 2 of course set 7. The second exclusion is only available for the second part. Now, before we actually get into prognosis and see the ability of creating the user ID and password and then logging into the portal as the patient would do it, this is an example of what your login detail screen looks like. And again, it can be either auto-generated by the presence of an email or manually generated through patient register. We've already opened Donna Paulson's chart. Now we see down here in the lower left, Donna does have an email. And the login details over here above her photograph is a red color, indicating that a user ID and password has been issued. Now I'm going to go ahead and click the icon, which we were just looking at in the PowerPoint, and we see here that her user ID is Donna, and it has been emailed to her because the email address is present. And so the password field is blank. When a password is generated in prognosis, it is good for one use only. So there is no reason to store it in the system. Once the patient uses it the first time, it immediately expires and the patient needs to change it. That is true whether you manually generate it or the system auto-generates it. So I'm actually going to log into my email now. And we see here what the email looks like that your patients will receive. Now this is outside of prognosis, obviously. So if your patients are using Yahoo Mail or Gmail or Outlook or whatever they use, you'll need to instruct them to go into their personal email. You see here that the email address subject says change password. And the from in my training database says do not reply at prognosis.com. That, of course, is a property that you can define so that it is specific to your practice. If you have never customized that property, you may want to verify, because a lot of patients may not know what prognosis is, and they need to set their spam filters so that they actually get the email from you. Now, there is a property in the system that will allow you to embed the user ID and password directly in the body of the email so that it does not come in an attachment. However, due to HIPAA, we do by default give it as a secured attachment, which is password protected. This is our default template that comes preloaded in prognosis. And of course, again, you can customize it if you wish. But we see here that there are 3 bullet points to the patient. The first one is that there is an attachment here that requires Adobe Acrobat Reader to read. Most computers nowadays have it, but in the event that your patient does not have it, there is a hyperlink here that will allow them to download it for free to their computer, which they would need to do in order to view the attachment. Now, the second bullet point is stating that the attachment is password protected, and that password is their date of birth. Please note, the date of birth is the password simply to viewing the attachment. The attachment actually has the ID and password to the portal. And then it does finally instruct the patient that they will have to change this password on the first login, and that their password that they give themselves need to be between 8 and 10 digits. So as Donna Paulson, I'm going to go ahead now and click my attachment to get my ID and password to the portal. So I'm going to go ahead and enter my date of birth in all 8 digits. And we see here now that my user ID to the portal is Donna. My password is lowercase user 2014. So now I'm going to log into the patient portal as Donna. So I've opened up the portal. And incidentally, the access you give your patients to the portal could either be giving them the URL, which is this address at the top that opens the page online, or many clients who have private websites for their clinic will simply put a link or a button on their website to make it easier for the patient. So that is, of course, your choice. But I'm going to go ahead and click in here because Donna is already registered. My user ID is Donna, and my password was user 2014. Now, since this is the first time I'm using it, it's going to prompt me that it is expired. So now I need to change it. So I'm going to put in user 2014 again, and then I'm going to create myself a new password that has to be at least 8 and 10 digits long. We see that here at the bottom, those reminders. Give myself a secret question. And not only 8 and 10 digits long, but it must include at least 1 letter, at least 1 number. And again, it is case sensitive. I mentioned back here on course set 7, measure 1, that the second bullet point for numerator credit is if there was no email, you have to at least log in. So I just logged in. So even though in this case it was actually generated by the email, so I was already compliant, you now have seen at least both ways to get credit for measure 1. Now for measure 2, If you notice here on the home page of the portal, I'm just going to stay logged in here as Donna, and I'm on my health record, which is the default view. Down here in the far lower left is the option called Ambulatory Summary. So I need to click on Ambulatory Summary. So now we see the Ambulatory Summary for Donna. And across the bottom, we have our action buttons. We can either now print it, we can download it, which means save a soft copy to our personal computer at home, or we can transmit it, which means emailing it to a third party. Now, whichever the patient chooses at this point is irrelevant as long as they choose one of them. Remember that for measure 2 of Core Set 7, 5% need to at least log in and come here to the Ambulatory Summary and at least view it, print it, download it, or transmit it in order for you to get credit. And in the background, the Prognosis Audit Trail will be tracking this activity so that you're able to get credit, and that would be whether it was the patient or the patient's authorized representative.